Hello, everyone. This is Angela Newsom with Book Reviews for Christian Families and RightLight Reviews. I wanted to welcome you to our program today. This is Kenny Sargent with Sargent Family Productions. Hi, Kenny.
Hi, Angela. Thanks for having me.
Sure. And what I want to do is give you the opportunity to kind of share a little bit about yourself and how you started writing and anything you'd like for our audience to know.
Okay, yeah. Well, I am a homeschooling father of 10. I work at Compassion International, and when I was 40 years old, it had never entered my mind one time in my whole life to write a book. And then God called me well before I was qualified. And now, 14 years later, I have written two books, and we've done several full cast audio productions. And we just have a heart for bringing God's message through stories.
That's awesome. So you did say, make sure everybody caught that 10 kids.
And
Now,
kids.
what's the from oldest? How old's your oldest? And then your youngest is in his teens, right? Or,
Correct, yes. So we have 10 children. Four of our older boys are married off, and we actually have six grandbabies already, and we're working on
nice.
number seven right now, which is awesome. Our oldest is 31, and yes, our youngest son is almost 14.
Nice. Wow, that's fantastic. So, you have some books to share with us, and I think one thing to take note of is you called it a full dramatized audio. How did you describe your recording that you have?
Yeah, so what we've done, and of course you know this because your husband is in the latest one, which is super fun. But we do full cast dramatized audio. So they're not just audiobooks; they're actually cast with a full cast, and we add sound and original music and try to make it as immersive as possible.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, and of course having your husband in it was fantastic.
Oh yes, he enjoyed that for sure. So, I've got some questions that I want to ask you so we can learn a little bit more about your productions and the things that you've got your fingers in. So the first question is this: why did you feel called to write stories specifically for older teens and adults instead of the younger audiences that most Christian fiction seems to target?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure it started that way, but it kind of, you know, how when God begins to bring you into something, you don't necessarily know how it's all going to look at first, of course. I think some of it was I'm drawn to the older ones. When your husband and I went to that camp recently, one of the young men that was with us, one of my interns, he's 22. I just love that age from the older teens to the 20 somethings uh and
And that camp
so
is was the Audio Drama Institute. For those
yes, Audio Drama Institute
yes.
was terrific, and we just had a there was zero convenient about it, Angela. It was
Yeah.
completely crazy for a week, but it was awesome. And yeah, so we feel like, you know, for me, I'm drawn to stories that have a lot more depth to them. I love the younger ones, but I really relate to the older kids and the adults. And so, but then as we kind of got into it more, I realized it was actually an underserved market in
Oh yeah.
Christian fiction and that sort of thing. And so it started with just kind of what I was interested in. We do Christian suspense, and it started with what I was interested in, but then it moved towards, wow, this is actually, I think, a focus that God has given us. So it was one of those where it sort of started organically that way, but once God made it clear He was calling us to that, that's definitely where we've focused.
Yes, I do think that you made a good point is it's an underserved um, genre, and especially because you're adding more than just an audiobook, but a dramatized version, and you've got a lot of younger audience opportunities for those kind of things, but not when they get up to the teens and adults, there's not really anything that's focused in a Christian manner for that group.
Yeah, and I've thought about kind of why some of that is, and I think, you know, at the end of the day, Angela, one of the things that we're wanting to do is become a trusted partner with people, as you are, right? The reason you do the group that you do, the groups that you do and stuff like that, is you're wanting to help, and we want to be a trusted partner. So it doesn't, in one sense, the age doesn't matter when you're trying for that.
Mhm.
But I think one of the things that we've also realized is it's just more difficult, right? It's so much more nuanced when our kids get older, and and then you're walking a narrow path, because stories, to be any good, have to have a lot of conflict, and all conflict is ultimately rooted in sin, and therefore it has to deal with sin, and it has to deal with evil. And yet, how do you do that in a wholesome way?
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So we'll go to question number two. Um, what do you mean by a thoroughly biblical worldview in fiction? And how does that shape the way you approach themes like marriage, gender, sin, and redemption?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the Bible paints a picture of reality that we believe is wholly true. So, for
Mhm.
example, when you read the first 11 chapters of Genesis, there's nothing in the human race that even comes close to painting an accurate picture of reality like Genesis 1 through 11. You have good, you have evil, you have people with a propensity for good, you have people with a propensity for evil. Why do we have both? You have things like the cosmos, and you have things like the earth and everything with the seed in itself. And there's just the table of nations and the evidence of a great flood. And there's so many things. And the need for redemption even is put in there. And of course, the fall of man in Genesis 3 and all of that. So we believe that, that the Bible is an authentic, true, not only a book of theology but a book of history. It's God's story. And so what we try to do when it comes to writing is tell stories that are grounded in that reality, which means genuine antagonism. It means certain characters that certainly don't go that direction, but there are also some that actually believe it. And so we try to make it so that things like biblical marriage are honored. Things like, here would be an example. We don't shy away from romance. We want it to be real, but it's got to be romance between a man and a woman that leads to biblical marriage, that's wholesomely told,
Mhm.
that especially when you're dealing with teens and young adults, but for everybody, right? It
Yeah.
needs to be. That's an example. Or suspense. You have to deal with things like evil, and you have to deal with sin, and of course those
Mhm.
things translate to things like murder, and they translate to things like violence and that sort of thing. So how do we tell those in ways that really honor the redemptive aspects of God's kingdom? So you have to portray it, but then you have to also portray redemption. So examples over the centuries would be things like Les Miserables and A Christmas
Mhm.
Carol, and things that Lewis and Tolkien wrote, and others, where there's this grounding in a biblical worldview, whether it's
Yes.
overt or not, is definitely what we try to do.
Now, one thing I realized that I don't think we mentioned at the very beginning is what are the names of your two publications and what are they about?
Yeah, so we started with a theme verse when I first started doing this, following the Lord's kind of journey into this, which was that verse from Psalm 119 that says, "Thy faithfulness is unto all generations." And so we started with the idea of generations, and thy faithfulness is unto all generations. And Angela, it came out of in Spurgeon had a commentary called The Treasury of David, and he was basically going through the various Psalms. And Psalm 89 is the one where Ethan the Ezrahite says, "I will sing of the mercies of the Lord forever. With my
Mhm.
mouth will I make known your faithfulness to all generations." So that theme was kind of in it, and the idea was, what Spurgeon was saying is, what Ethan sang with his tongue, he wrote down with his pen, and it became a hymn book for 3,000 years of redemptive
Right.
history, right? It's amazing. So our goal would be to declare the faithfulness of God. And so Generations is the title. The first one is Those Who Don't Know History May Live to See Tomorrow. It's kind of a play on those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. Those who don't know history may live. In other words, if you find out the truth, it might kill you. That's what that means. And so it's a mystery suspense. And then and it's a story about a young man who finds himself on two treasure hunts from different generations at the same time with clues that interweave. And so it's very fun there. And then the second one is called Generations 2, the DC Gambit. And it moves from Colorado as the setting to DC as the setting. And it's much more of a political next chapter for these young adults and their parents, or young adults and the adults in their lives. So yeah, it's based on the
Okay.
concept of generational faithfulness.
Great. All right. So now people can take note of that for sure. All right. Question number 3. Let's move right along. Christian fiction for adults and especially for young adults sometimes avoids grit and nuance. Other times it slimes the readers with gratuitous content, which we absolutely abhor. How do you balance being honest about difficult themes while still being wholesome and God honoring?
Yeah, it's another good question. We try for, first of all, we do it everything prayerfully. So we just try to invite the Lord into everything, like you and I prayed before
Mhm.
this. We just really try to invite the Lord in. So there can be just a check from the Lord of, okay, you're a little bit over the line on this. Um, Also, just trying to, there's times I think when you have to summarize, when you can't get
Yeah.
into you've just got to summarize. It's kind of like the Bible. And I mean, in one sense, the Bible has some places that are horrible,
Mhm.
horrible in terms of what it describes, and they summarize it. And we
Right.
certainly don't go to the places the Bible goes, but but the idea would be there's times to summarize, there's times to, and even though we want to dramatize everything, what's the reason for the dramatization, right? Drama, you've heard the old thing, show don't tell, right? So the idea is we want to bring our readers and listeners into an emotional experience,
Mhm.
but we've got to do that in a wholesome way. And so therefore there are many times we just don't tell it as graphically as it would be in real life. We certainly
Right.
don't use the language that we would be used. We don't paint the pictures that would be used. We just can't go as far down as human life actually goes.
Right.
That would be an example.
Now, do you have a place like on the back of the book or on your website or anything like that that talks about those kind of gritty things that you do get into in case some people are more sensitive, to certain topics? Or
No, I wouldn't say we probably should, but I can say it here. I mean, we allow for a certain amount of violence. We definitely don't do anything as it relates to sexuality. We do have a tasteful amount of romance in it but it would be hearts connecting as opposed to what you would see in normal young adult fiction or even adult fiction
Mhm.
nowadays. We do have violence though for sure, and again we try to tell it very wholesomely, and we try to also make it very clear where we stand on it, which is
Mhm.
um we're not okay. Like, even when our main characters have flaws, we don't paint them like that's cool. We paint it in such a way where it's like
Yeah.
that, and we try to do it subtly though, because it can be, we're also not trying to put a sermon on paper. So that's where the narrow way comes in. It's not a medium for preaching, and yet we try to make it so that the gospel, for example, is quite clear in it, but it's got to be authentically woven into the story as opposed to something that's sort of stuck on for a message. And
Right.
that's a challenge to do, Angela. It really
Mhm.
is. But by God's grace, we think we've done it, and so we try to be straightforward, and yet we uh, basically we have to show it. We don't really want it to be, it has to be dramatized. It can't just be explained. It can't be sermonized. It's a different medium. And that's actually one of the ways we ask people to trust us is when we say we want to be trusted with the content, but we also want to
Mhm.
be trusted that we're not going to just tell a sermon in a story, that we're actually going to dramatize it and trust the readers to get what they get out of it, as opposed to feeling like we always have to explain. That's another example. You ever been in a drama where there's an explanation afterwards? It kind of takes the emotional
Yeah,
impact out of it. It's that we don't want that.
right. Okay, so a little along those lines, would you say if someone was asking, because I know a lot of times in our groups, some people have relatives or friends or acquaintances that don't want to read anything spiritual, but they're trying to witness or they're trying to give them options that aren't going to be too preachy. Um, is there mention of God or Jesus or Bible things in your stories?
There are.
Oh,
There are, but they are done again in the way we kind of try to position it, Angela, is you know how if you think about the way that people come into the kingdom historically over years and generations is people that love God introduce them to the God they love. One of the things that we try to do is we try to have it so you could hand this book to an unbeliever and they would thoroughly enjoy it. In fact, we have unbelievers that read it, but they're in there woven authentically into it are genuine appeals to the gospel, genuine prayers, genuine answers to prayers, genuine references. But there's also a lot of political subterfuge. There's a lot of real antagonism and all of that kind of stuff that would make a genuine suspense.
okay. Let's move on to question number 4 I have for you. Can you share how your stories portray romance in a way that honors God's design for marriage? Because we touched on that before, but some people might be a little bit more concerned because you talked about being gritty and all that, but you've
Yes.
kind of shared a little bit about your vision, but um I'm guessing it's romance between non-married young people that maybe lead to marriage. We don't want to spoil anything, but
Yeah, I mean that's what it is, and we want to honor. Proverbs 30 talks about how there's, remember in that part where there's three things that are too wonderful, four that are too wonderful, or three things that are too amazing, or whatever, and four that are too wonderful, and one of them is the way of a man with a maiden, and the way that God brings people together in real life, we love that process and we love the wonder in it, and so we've tried to put that in it as well. Super wholesome, very much leading to yeah, exactly. Without spoiling anything, the idea is any genuine romances lead to marriage and that sort of thing between one man and one woman. We do not believe in any other way of God's design. It's very clear. And yet we want to not, because that's one of the things that Christian fiction, especially for the younger ones, probably rightly so, avoids altogether. And we don't want to avoid it altogether, but we want to make it something where people go, ah, that's what I want. I want God to
mm,
be in my love story. I want God. And you guys you and Chad have a good marriage. Erica and I have a good marriage. I mean, God's been there in our marriages, and it's such a great gift. So yes, I would say for sure. But we want to do it very wholesomely. We want to do it very much really kind of based rather in wonder rather than physicality and other things that would
mm,
be in normal. It's based on wow, this is God brought Eve type of thing.
right. Yeah, I think that's good because Christian writers can go to the opposite extreme where there's no romance, and then those that do want romance, where can they go and find it played out in a book that's wholesome? So very good.
Yeah, we've had a number of the young adults that they just really like it for various reasons. One of the seniors at a homeschool conference recently said to me, she was a friend of some of my kids. She goes, I have listened to this an embarrassing number of times, and they just
Hmm.
really like it. They just really like it for that reason, and it is wholesome, and it does paint a picture of God's in this,
Hmm.
and so I love that.
So, what age would you say that the stories start off? What's a good age if people are
Mhm.
wondering what would be good?
I mean, your mileage may vary, of course, as it does for that, and some. some of us as parents have let our kids be a little earlier with things like Tolkien and stuff than we would have with our older
Mhm.
ones. They get a little older, but I would say 15 and up probably is about right.
Okay. All right. I want to ask kind of a different type of question, kind of go a different focus here, but what role does high quality storytelling play in Christian literature? Why is it important to go beyond just safe or clean content and aim for truly excellent and God glorifying stories? So again, high quality storytelling, what role does that play in Christian literature?
When you think about all the stories that you've consumed in your life, which ones are sort of in a class by themselves, right? Which are the ones, and what I've tried to reflect on over the years is why are those in a class by themselves? What is it about a story that really, when it really works, and there are a number of elements that come together in that, but it it's hard to explain, but the gist of it is the quality level is high on a number of different fronts. And at the end of the day, what are we trying to do with the story? We're trying to experience something.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives us an experience that if it's done well, it's so satisfying and it so hits home and it so stays with you. And it's something that over the years, you just know that was a great story. So we have to do the work. And so for example, I have been on a journey for 10,000 hours at least asking God, Lord, teach me how to tell a story in a way
Mm-hmm.
that moves the heart and in a way that satisfies and in a way that it doesn't cheat. Things like if it's not on the page, it doesn't count. Sometimes I can think it's on the page when it's still just in my mind.
Right.
Or if you can't pay something off that you haven't set up, and you can't set something up, you're not paying a payoff. Those are the things. It's got your characters they have to behave in authentic ways, and that's one of the hardest things to get right. So there are a number of elements that come together in great storytelling, and so we have really that's one of the things we go after more than anything else is how do we make this a genuinely high quality production, and that
Mm-hmm.
usually includes a lot of prayer, it includes a lot of study, and it includes a lot of help. There are a number of people that help. So let me give you an example of that kind of anecdotally,
Mm-hmm.
Angela. Here's an example. So two drafts into Generations 2, without spoiling too much, the ones that were engaged at the beginning of the book, um, kind of broke them apart with some stuff in the story, and there was a couple of chapters where they were kind of broken apart. And one of my story consultants said, she goes, you're squandering a huge opportunity for tension and conflict, don't you? And I go, no, what are you
Mm-hmm.
talking about? And she said, you need to do this. She said, we know they're not really broken up. So what came out of it was you need to break them up for real in the story with absolutely no chance of them getting back together. And so we yanked them apart for like 2/3 of the
Mm-hmm.
story, and the tension just goes like this.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's just there's no way. How could they possibly get back together? But when I heard my story consultant say that, one of them, I've several, I was like, oh, that's going to be so much work. It was going to be so much work to do. So it took me 6 months to really fix that. It was
Oh,
so
wow.
much work. But it was so worth it. So that kind of feedback is gold.
Right.
And so that just that kind of help to really get people that know what they're doing to say, okay, you're actually not getting it done here.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
use that as a way of driving the story to a higher quality.
One thing that I noted about your stories is they're modern. They take place in a modern world, and a lot of the stories that we maybe either grew up on or that people are trying to find, because there's some people that don't want historical, they don't want fantasy, they don't want magic, they want something real that they can connect with, that something like could happen now. And
Yeah.
so that's one way that your story is different, and it's a here and now story, and it's modern, but it's also wholesome, and it leads people in good direction.
Yeah, that's very true. We have, and I think some of that is my own preference, Angela. I mean, I love Tolkien and stuff like that, and um, but I love modern. The genre is actually called realistic fiction. Okay,
Mm,
and so yes, it's based in a realism, and some of the reason I like that is I like I like not having to work to understand the world. You know what I'm saying? I there's
mhm,
people don't have to work to understand the Instagram is part of the life. You know, they don't have to. This is that's just so there's so much you get for free in terms of the world that you build. Now, don't get me
mhm,
wrong. I like a good fantasy. I love Tolkien. It's my favorite story of all time is Lord of the Rings. But I like realistic fiction. I like cop stuff. I like political stuff. I like treasure hunts, but they're based in the modern world. And I just, I like, there's a drug cover up. There's these kinds of things that,
mhm.
those are the kinds of things that I enjoy. So I think that comes out, of course.
Here's an interesting question for you. How do you hope readers will feel or respond after finishing one of your books or audiobooks?
Have you ever had have you ever had it happen? There's a number of ways that a story gets derailed. Okay. Sometimes you never get into it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can be going good for a while and then it takes some turns where you go, huh? And many times, I'm sure you've had this. I know, Chad and I have had many conversations about story. It just doesn't end well. Okay. And when it doesn't end well, it's so disappointing. So
Right.
what's the opposite of that? The opposite of that is when you go, ah, that was awesome. I love that. I love the way that ends. I love that saw it through and finished and it comes with a certain satisfaction. It's really hard to describe exactly, but it's a feeling of yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. With Generations 2, it's kind of a given, but want to make sure that I do ask these questions. You do not want to read Generations 2 first. It's a continuation story from the first one, from Generations, correct?
For sure. For sure. Yeah, it's
Okay.
I mean, technically you could. But you wouldn't want to read them out of order. If you could only read one, you might read the second one. But I have had very likely an equal number of people that have preferred one or the other. That's been actually really a blessing to hear is I don't know, it's nearly 50-50, probably not quite. There might be a few more that like the first one better, but it's super close, which is great.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
good.
certainly you want to have it in that, and I know again your husband. We had such a good time. Your husband plays, um, he plays a bad guy for quite a while in the story, and that was kind of fun for him, I think. And he also plays this deep voiced FBI agent, cool guy. So it's fun.
Yeah. Yep, he had a lot of fun playing those parts. All right, so question, how can readers, parents, and church communities use this kind of fiction as a resource to encourage faith and discipleship?
Yeah, I think there's two answers to that. Number one is it just does it by the nature of how it's written. That is one of our main goals, is that people will be drawn closer to the Lord. But it's again, it's done in a show don't tell way. We really are not trying to sermonize here. And then the second thing is what I mentioned before, where it should be able to be handed to a friend and move them. It's very possible the Lord can move them on a journey towards Him. So things like just some of the gritty stuff that's dealt with these are very real situations that happen to real people in them.
Mm-hmm.
Like an example would be, how do we handle someone who in their past is dealing with the effects of abortion and how would God think about that? Those kinds of things. So there's again, it's told carefully and tastefully, but it's a very real thing to have to deal with. And
Mm-hmm.
that's an example of a part of the story.
I know some of the questions in the group, sometimes people are looking for male lead characters, female lead characters. I think you have a mix, correct? So someone either sex would work great for this kind of book, right?
100%. Yeah, in fact,
Okay.
but I do, what's one of the things that I do that a lot of stories nowadays don't do is we don't have a girl boss, right? We don't
Mm,
have, in fact, just as a tiny bit of a spoiler, one of the things that the young ladies, especially the female lead who plays opposite the protagonist, she's the more spiritually mature one at the beginning of the story, and that changes over the course of two books.
mm,
And this is an example of a biblical worldview, Angela, is she feels a sense of true rightness about that. So we're not going to win friends with somebody that wants a girl boss. We're not going to win friends with people that want a female character that doesn't need a man. We believe one of the best stories, I believe, have an interdependency between the characters where
mm.
they just help each other in different ways and at different times, and you see a lot of that in our books.
Okay.
But you also interdependency means by its very definition there's places of dependency of even the protagonists. But at the end of the day, for example, the female lead, she feels great that her husband is going to lead. And
Mm,
that feels
yeah.
awesome. So, take it for what it's worth. We're not going to, and not everybody's going to like that, but we believe very strongly that that's the right order. But it's in a way that's very mutually lay down your life type of a feel. But we
Right.
believe in interdependency. And I think the best stories are that where in different scenes, different characters really have what it takes to get them through it, which I love.
I know a lot of people are doing book clubs these days. Would you think that your book, if they started with, Generations, the first one, do you think it would go well for a book club and discussion? Do you think it would
Absolutely.
work?
Oh,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
without a doubt, unequivocally, I do. For all the reasons we've talked about and more.
And do you think that it would do, I mean, I'm guessing a lot of times you see women wanting to do book clubs, but there's probably men out there that are looking for books that are going to be wholesome but yet not wimpy, if you want.
Hmm.
And so this, I think, would fit. Now, um, the audio book version, the dramatized, that's not some short thing for people to listen to. It's the full book. So how long are your audiobooks? Because you've got your second one just came out. So how long is the first one? If you can remember, how long is the
Yeah.
first one
The
and the
first one's
second?
a little more than 13 and a half hours, and the second one is 15 hours and 45 minutes. So they're great for road trips. They're great
Mm,
for exercise. They're great for dishes. They're great for being on the lawnmower, that kind of thing. It's this filling in the space of life, for sure, absolutely. And we knew we wanted an audio for them, but we had access
mm,
to a theater community. We had access to talented voice
right.
actors, and so we've got a great composer and stuff like that. So we just felt like it fit us really well. Plus, nobody told us we couldn't do it, and so the Lord. Usually, it's not usually the recommended way to do it. Start with a 13 and a half hour production, but we did it.
Yeah. Now, it's word for word, correct?
With
So,
the exception of what you would call the attributions. Jordan
right.
said, we almost always leave those out unless the sentence gets clunky. So
Mm,
it ends up being kind of a curious medium because we had to figure out where to place the sound effects
right.
when it comes to how the narrator does it, um and the narrator is a character for sure. But you really do have a full cast as well. There's probably 30 to 40 in the cast of Generations 2. I think we just got through. Your husband plays a couple of roles, as you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it ends up being a rich audio experience for sure. And we have a really good narrator. And so that's but all of the roles are cast as with actual actors as opposed to the narrator just changing their voice.
And are there actual breaks between chapter that says like chapter 2 or
There
whatever?
are. There
Okay.
are.
Because like if people were on a road trip and let's say parents with their older teens and they're like, all right, we're going to listen to this chapter and then open for discussions. Anybody have anything they want to talk about? There would be those chapter breaks,
Oh, absolutely.
obviously,
Yeah.
where they could do that.
Yeah, in fact,
And
and it's classic audiobook in that way. In fact, we even have chapter titles. Um,
mm-hmm,
but but yeah, those are the breaks, and so you can listen to it in all the different places. So Audible has it, Spotify has it, we have
mm-hmm.
Hoopla has it, we have a number of different places. We have a platform called Awsound that we use that allows you to download it to Google Podcasts and Apple Podcasts. So it clearly has the chapter breaks.
Great. All right. So where can people find you?
Yeah, so we are at sargentfamilyproductions.com. I'll go ahead and, for those that are listening, it's Sargent. And you can kind of see here if I bring it up on the screen, sargentfamilyproductions.com.
Stories you can trust. So there's Generations 2, and there's reviews and interviews that you can find on Sargent Family Productions, trailers. All right. So again, that's sargentfamilyproductions.com, Sargent, where you can find all that you need to about Kenny and what he's doing with Generations. And you have some trailers too on the website, right? Do you have a
Yes.
trailer also for um, the second one too?
We have
Correct?
multiple trailers for each story. So yeah, if you just go to sargentfamilyproductions.com/trailers, and of course it's on the main, you can get to it from the main homepage as well. We've got two trailers for each of the major productions that we've done.
So if you like intrigue, suspense, you've got some FBI stuff going on. What are some other like keywords for people that are looking for a new story that's realistic and today?
Yeah, the first one is so like the a way we might say it is to save his family. A 1960s scientist implicates himself in a murder and leaves a trail of secrets into a deadly corporate cover-up. That's the first one. And as I mentioned earlier in the call, it's got two treasure hunts from different generations at the same time. So it's got a medical drug cover-up. It's got uh, law enforcement. It's got underground tunnels. It's got all kinds of fun stuff there. And then the second one, in the swirl of a hitman's revenge, blackmail terrorizes the Senate as two hackers face off in a battle of wits that could shake the foundations of the US government. So it's got hackers, it's got the Senate, it's got the FBI, it's got a team of hitmen. It's a fun ride too, for sure.
But somehow you interweave wholesome, godly characters dealing with real life things that point to Christ.
We do. I mean, I think I sent you a few examples of what we've seen as the comments. People really like it for that reason. They feel like it's both suspenseful and wholesome at the same time.
Hmm. Yes, which is fantastic. So, everyone, make sure that you check out Kenny Sargent, sargentfamilyproductions.com. Also, um, with Generations and Generations 2, not only the books, but the fully dramatized audio recordings as well. So, thanks so much, Kenny, for coming on. And this is Angela Newsom with Book Reviews for Christian Families and RightLight Media. And we look forward to talking to you next time. Thanks. Bye bye.